My name is Tyler, I'm 22, and for 3 years I kept a secret that was eating me up inside. Every family gathering became a silent torture. Every weekend at the family cabin turned into a test of emotional endurance. All because of him. Jasper Rodriguez, my cousin Felix's friend who somehow infiltrated our family so much that he's practically a relative now. If you've ever felt invisible around someone you admire, drop a like because this story is going to surprise you in a way you never imagined. I've always been the quiet cousin, the one who prefers to observe rather than participate in the lively conversations during family barbecues. I'm a freshly graduated mechanical engineer. I work part-time at a vintage motorcycle shop in downtown Denver, and I have a weird obsession with psychological thrillers, the kind of movie most people consider too heavy. My escape has always been working with my hands, fixing broken things, finding precision in the middle of chaos. Maybe that's why I feel so uncomfortable when I can't fix my own feelings. My crush on Jasper started 3 years ago, during a visit I made to the university campus to see Felix. Jasper was there, sitting on the steps of the architecture building, camera in his lap, talking to a group of students about natural light and composition. He was 23 at the time, with brown hair that was always slightly messy, a few discreet tattoos on his left forearm, and that natural confidence some people are just born with. When he smiled at me that first time, a kind of ironic smile, as if he knew some secret I didn't, I felt something in my stomach I couldn't name. Since then, Jasper has become a constant presence at family events. Felix brought him for Thanksgiving, then Christmas, then birthdays, until he simply became part of our core. My mom always cooks an extra plate just in case Jasper shows up. My dad asks about his photography projects, and my grandmother has officially declared that he has a good heart, which in our family is practically a certificate of adoption. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. For me, every one of his appearances was a mix of joy and agony. Joy, because I would finally have a few hours in his presence, watching his gestures, listening to his voice, memorizing details that would then echo in my head for weeks. Agony because I had to pretend he was just another family friend, when in reality, my heart raced every time he said my name or made a joke directed at me. Jasper works as a freelance photographer, specializing in urban landscapes and portraits, but also takes occasional jobs as a bartender at exclusive events, something I discovered after 3 years of discreetly observing him. He has this natural ability to make anyone feel interesting during a conversation, as if he's genuinely paying attention to what you have to say. He's magnetic without trying to be, charismatic without forcing it, and has a subtle humor that only those who pay attention really notice. During those 3 years, I cultivated elaborate fantasies about conversations we never had, intimate moments that only existed in my imagination, scenarios where I would finally have the courage to admit what I felt. But the reality was always the same. I stayed in my corner. He was kind and friendly as always, and I went home feeling like a pathetic teenager with an impossible crush. The cabin is in the Colorado mountains, 2 hours from Denver, in a region where the air is so clean you can see every star in the sky at night. It's a property that has belonged to our family for 2 generations. A rustic wooden building with a stone fireplace, a large deck with a panoramic view of the valley, and camping spots near a natural clearing a few meters from a crystal-clear lake. My routine on those weekends has always been the same. I arrive on Friday night, always the first one there, because I genuinely enjoy the tranquility of those initial moments. I check if there's enough firewood for the weekend, organize the supplies I brought from the city, and prepare the outdoor grill my dad installed on the deck a few years ago. The smell of pine mixed with the fresh mountain air calms me in a way no other place can. I have a sort of obsessive tradition of cooking the welcome dinner on Friday. Usually something elaborate like grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, or a mushroom risotto I learned by watching YouTube tutorials during sleepless nights. Cooking gives me something to focus on when I get nervous, and on family weekends, I always get nervous. Especially when I know Jasper is going to show up. The house itself is a museum of family memories. Photos on the walls from all the past summers here. Board games stored in wicker baskets that no one uses anymore. The out-of-tune piano my cousin tried to learn when she was 12. Every corner echoes with laughter from previous summers. My uncle's heated political arguments, off-key singing around the bonfire. During the winter, the stone fireplace becomes the heart of the house, warming not just the room, but creating that cozy atmosphere only places with history can have. I always wake up early on those weekends, before sunrise, to enjoy the only moments of true peace before the group arrives. I make coffee in the rustic kitchen, sit on the deck wrapped in a blanket, and watch the valley still covered in a light morning mist. It's in those moments that I can organize my thoughts and psychologically prepare myself for another weekend pretending Jasper is just another friend. The sound of the wind in the trees, the crackle of the fireplace when it's still cold, the birds starting their first songs of the day. These elements contrast sharply with the fast-paced rhythm of city life, where I work in a noisy workshop surrounded by Denver's constant traffic. Here, the silence has texture, it has weight, it has meaning. It was on a Friday in October that everything started to change. Felix called me on Thursday night, his voice full of frustration, to tell me he wouldn't be able to make it to the traditional family weekend. An emergency at the law firm where he works as a junior associate. A case that blew up at the last minute and would require his entire weekend for legal precedent research. Aria, his girlfriend of 2 years, also couldn't go, as she had scheduled a trip to visit her parents in Portland months ago. Tyler, man, I'm so sorry. I know you always put so much care into organizing everything, Felix said on the phone, and I could hear the genuine exhaustion in his voice. Carson and Quinn also canceled. Some food poisoning after they tried that new sushi restaurant. Looks like it's going to be a weekend just for you this time. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Disappointment because I genuinely enjoy my family's company, and relief because it meant a weekend without the constant tension of being near Jasper pretending to be normal. Or so I thought. I arrived at the house on Friday night as always, but the atmosphere was different. The silence seemed denser, more present. I lit the fireplace, organized my supplies in the kitchen, and started preparing a simple dinner just for myself. None of the usual elaborate production, just a pastrami sandwich and a beer. I was starting to settle into the idea of a solitary weekend of reading and hiking when, around 9 o'clock at night, I heard the unmistakable sound of Jasper's motorcycle engine approaching on the dirt road. My stomach instantly tied itself in a knot. Obviously, Felix had forgotten to tell him about the cancellations. I watched through the living room window as he turned off the motorcycle near the deck, took off his helmet, revealing that always slightly messy hair, and looked around confused by the absence of other cars. He was wearing a black leather jacket, dark jeans, and sunglasses that he only took off when he realized something was different. Even in the dark, illuminated only by the deck's outdoor light, he managed to be absurdly attractive. I opened the door before he even knocked, trying to control the look of surprise on my face. "Jasper, hey, didn't Felix tell you?" He gave that kind of ironic smile that always made my heart race. "Tell me what? That I'd get here before everyone else? That's new." He paused, looking around the empty property. "Or that I'd get here after everyone else had already left?" "Actually," I replied, gesturing for him to come in. "Everyone canceled. Felix had a work emergency, Carson and Quinn got sick, Aria traveled to Portland. It's just the two of us this time." Jasper stopped in the middle of the room, processing the information. For a moment, I thought he'd make some excuse and leave. After all, what would be the point of spending a weekend with just his best friend's quiet cousin? But instead, he took off his leather jacket, revealing a gray t-shirt that highlighted the muscles in his chest and arms, and smiled in a way I couldn't interpret. "Well," he said, throwing the jacket over the leather couch near the fireplace, "then I guess we'll have to make do on our own. Have you had dinner yet?" I offered to share my sandwich, but he insisted we cook something together. "You always make these amazing dinners for everyone," he commented, already exploring the contents of the refrigerator. "Today, it's my turn to contribute." That's how we ended up side by side in the small kitchen, preparing a pasta with fresh tomato sauce that he improvised with ingredients I had brought. There was something surrealistically domestic about that scene. Jasper expertly chopping tomatoes while I boiled the water for the pasta, our bodies naturally navigating around each other in the limited space. "Tyler," he said during dinner, as we ate sitting on the living room floor in front of the crackling fireplace, "can I ask you a kind of personal question?" I swallowed, trying to imagine what was coming next. "Sure. Have you always been so observant? Even when we were younger, you always seemed to be paying attention to things others missed." I didn't know how to answer without sounding weird, so I just confirmed with a nod. Jasper continued, "I like that about you. Most people just listen waiting for their turn to talk. You actually listen." I felt my face heat up, grateful for the low light of the fireplace that disguised my blush. "I guess I've always been better at observing than participating." "Maybe," he said, looking me directly in the eyes in a way that made my stomach flip. "You just need the right situation to participate." We spent the rest of the night talking about things we had never discussed in a group. Jasper told me about his childhood in a large, noisy Mexican family in Albuquerque. How he started in photography after inheriting an analog camera from his grandfather. His frustrations with clients who want Instagram photos instead of genuine art. I talked about my obsession with mechanics, how I find peace in the meticulous process of disassembling and reassembling engines. My theory that fixing broken things is a form of meditation. Around midnight, as the embers in the fireplace began to fade, I realized we had unconsciously moved closer on the couch. We weren't touching, but the space between us had gradually decreased during the hours of conversation. I could feel the heat of his body, smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the leathery aroma of his jacket. "We should probably get some sleep," Jasper said, but he made no move to get up. "Tomorrow we can explore that trail Felix is always talking about." "Sure," I replied, also not moving. We stayed there for a few more minutes, watching the embers of the fireplace, lost in our own thoughts. When we finally went up to our rooms, Jasper stopped at the door of the guest room he always uses. "Tyler?" He called my name when I was already almost entering my own room. "Thanks for letting me stay. I know it wasn't exactly the weekend you planned." "Thanks for staying," I replied, surprising myself with my own honesty. It would have been weird to be here alone. He smiled. Not the usual ironic smile, but something softer, more genuine. "Good night, Tyler." "Good night, Jasper." Saturday morning brought a crystal-clear sky and a perfect temperature for outdoor activities. I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon coming from the kitchen, and found Jasper already awake, preparing an elaborate breakfast. He was barefoot, wearing only jeans and a white t-shirt, hair still messy from sleep, and there was something intimately familiar about that image that made my heart race. "I hope you like scrambled eggs," he said, without turning from the stove. "I'm not as talented in the kitchen as you, but I get by." We sat on the deck to have breakfast, watching the valley still covered by the morning mist. The conversation flowed naturally, without the awkward silences I always feared when we were alone. Jasper asked me questions about my plans after college, whether I intended to stay at the workshop or pursue something more related to engineering itself. For the first time, someone seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "You know," he said, pointing to the valley with his coffee cup, "I've always wondered what it would be like to grow up with access to a place like this. My family always lived in small apartments in the city. The idea of having a refuge like this seems almost too luxurious to be real." "It's funny," I replied. "For me it was always normal. Only recently did I start to realize how lucky I am to have this place to escape to when things get too intense." "Intense how?" The question caught me off guard. Jasper was looking at me with that focused attention he reserved for his photography projects, as if he was trying to capture something essential about me. "Just life, you know? Work, family, social pressures. Sometimes I feel like I'm living the life others expect me to live, not necessarily the one I would choose." He nodded slowly. "I understand perfectly. Sometimes I wonder if I chose photography because I genuinely love it, or because it's the kind of career that allows me to avoid committing to anything permanent." We spent the morning fixing a fence near the lake that had been damaged by a recent storm. Working side by side was surprisingly natural. Jasper held the boards in place while I nailed, our movements synchronized as if we had done it hundreds of times before. He made witty comments about my technique. "Are you sure you're an engineer? Because you're using that hammer as if it were a surgical precision instrument." And I caught myself laughing in a genuine way that rarely happened around him. During lunch, which we improvised with breakfast leftovers, Jasper pulled out his camera and started photographing details of the property. "Can I photograph you working?" he asked when we returned to the fence project. "There's something interesting about the way you focus on manual tasks." I was initially embarrassed, but gradually I got used to the sound of the shutter capturing candid moments. Jasper had this ability to become almost invisible when he was photographing, allowing me to relax and just be myself. Later, when he showed me some of the photos on the small camera screen, I was surprised to see how natural they looked, as if he had captured a version of me that I myself didn't recognize. In the afternoon, we decided to take a hike on Felix's favorite trail, a 2-hour route that winds through the dense forest before opening into a clearing with a panoramic view of the valley. It was the first time we had taken this trail alone, without the constant chatter of the usual group, and the slower pace allowed us to truly appreciate the details of the path. Jasper often stopped to photograph details. A fallen trunk covered in moss, the way the light filtered through the leaves creating patterns on the forest floor, my silhouette outlined against a century-old tree. "The light here is incredible," he commented, adjusting settings on the camera. "It's completely different from urban light. More honest, if that makes sense." When we reached the clearing at the top of the trail, the sun was beginning to decline, painting the valley with golden tones that seemed almost unreal. We sat on the large rock that serves as a natural lookout point, sharing a bottle of water and a handful of nuts that I had brought in my backpack. "Tyler," Jasper said after a few minutes of contemplative silence, "can I ask you something I've been wondering for a while?" My stomach tightened. "Sure. Have you ever felt like you're playing a role? As if the version of you that you show people isn't completely real?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. It was exactly how I felt, especially around him, but I had never been able to articulate it that way. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I feel like you're hiding behind a safe version of yourself, and I wonder what it would be like to know the real version." I looked at him, trying to decipher if there was any hidden meaning in the question, or if it was just genuine curiosity. His brown eyes reflected the golden light of the late afternoon, and there was something in his expression that I couldn't identify. Anticipation? Hope? Interest? "I guess," I replied carefully. "We all do that to some extent. We show the parts of ourselves that we know will be accepted. And the parts that might not be accepted? Those are kept hidden." Jasper nodded slowly. "And what if I told you I'm more interested in those hidden parts than in the safe version?" My heart started beating faster. There was something in the way he spoke, in the tone of his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, that suggested layers of meaning I didn't dare interpret. "I'd say you might be disappointed. Sometimes we hide things for good reasons." "Or sometimes," he said, leaning slightly in my direction, "we hide things because we're afraid of discovering that they might be exactly what someone else is looking for." The air between us seemed to become charged with electricity. We were sitting closer than necessary on the rock, and I could feel the heat emanating from his body. The conversation had taken a turn that I could no longer pretend to ignore, but I also didn't know how to navigate it without risking everything. "Jasper," I began, but I didn't know how to continue the sentence. "Tyler," he said my name in a way I had never heard before, softer, more intimate. "How long do you think I've been noticing the way you look at me?" I felt my face heat up violently. You don't have to deny it," he interrupted gently. "I'm not judging you. In fact, I'm asking you because—" He paused, as if he were choosing his words carefully. "Because maybe you're not the only one who has hidden feelings." The world seemed to stop. The sound of the forest around us, birds, wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the stream. Everything was muffled by the sound of my own heart beating in my ears. I looked at Jasper, searching for signs that I had misunderstood, but I found only an expression of vulnerability I had never seen in him before. "Jasper," I managed to whisper. "What are you saying?" He reached out and gently touched my arm. "I'm saying that maybe it's time for us to stop acting and start being honest about what we really feel." The walk back down the trail happened in a silence charged with unspoken possibilities. Every step we took seemed to lead us not only back to the house, but to a completely new territory between us. Jasper walked slightly ahead of me, and I caught myself observing the movement of the muscles in his back under the t-shirt, the way his hair moved in the afternoon breeze, details I had always noticed but which now seemed to have a different meaning. When we got back to the house, the sun was setting, and the first stars were starting to appear in the clean mountain sky. Jasper stopped on the deck, looking up. "Tyler, have you ever noticed how different the sky is here? In the city, we can barely see a few stars. Here it's like we can touch the universe." I stood beside him, our shoulders almost touching. "I've always loved the nights here. It's when everything feels more real, more honest." He turned to look at me. "More honest? It's hard to lie to yourself when you're alone under a sky like this. Everything seems very small and very big at the same time. And what do you usually think about during those honest nights?" The question hung in the air between us. I could feel we had reached a point of no return, where every word I chose would irreversibly change our dynamic. "About things I don't have the courage to think about during the day." Jasper took one step closer. "Like what?" My heart was beating so fast I was sure he could hear it. "Like, what it would be like if some of the people in my life knew who I really am. What I really want. And what do you really want, Tyler?" The way he said my name made something melt inside me. I looked at him. Really looked, without trying to disguise or look away like I always did. His brown eyes reflected the golden light coming from the house windows, and there was an intensity there that I had never allowed myself to fully perceive. "I want to stop being afraid," I replied, surprised by my own honesty. "I want to stop watching my life from the outside, as if it were a movie I'm watching instead of living." Jasper slowly raised his hand, giving me time to pull back if I wanted to, and touched my cheek. His skin was slightly rough from the day's work, but the touch was incredibly soft. And what if I told you that you don't have to be afraid with me? I closed my eyes, allowing myself to fully feel that moment. Jasper, Tyler, he interrupted gently. Can we go inside? It's getting cold, and I think this conversation deserves a more comfortable place. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We went into the house, and Jasper immediately headed to the fireplace, starting to revive the embers that were still left from the night before. The golden light of the fire gradually filled the room, creating an intimate atmosphere that made my stomach churn with nervousness and anticipation. Come here, he said, sitting on the rug in front of the fireplace and patting the space next to him. Sit with me. I sat down, leaving a small space between us, but Jasper immediately moved closer, eliminating the distance. We were sitting side by side, shoulders touching, looking at the flames dancing in the fireplace. The heat of the fire mixed with the warmth emanating from his body, creating a sense of protection and intimacy I had never experienced. Tyler, he began, turning his body slightly to face me. How long have you been feeling this, that you're feeling? I took a deep breath, knowing this was my chance to be completely honest. 3 years, since the first day I met you on campus. He smiled, not the usual ironic smile, but something softer, more vulnerable. 3 years keeping that to yourself? I thought it would be easier that way, that it would eventually pass, that I'd be able to move on. And did it pass? I looked at him, at the way the firelight highlighted the contours of his face, at the genuine intensity in his eyes. No, it just got stronger, more impossible to ignore. Jasper reached out and found my hand, lacing our fingers together. His skin was warm, slightly calloused from his photography work, and the contact sent waves of electricity up my arm. Tyler, can I tell you a secret? I nodded, unable to speak. I've also been feeling this for a long time. Maybe not a full 3 years, but at least since last summer, when you were fixing that broken fence and I watched you work for 2 hours straight. There was something about your concentration, the way your hands moved, that made me realize I was looking at you in a different way. I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath me. You too? Me too, he confirmed, squeezing my hand. But I thought it would be crazy. You're my best friend's cousin, someone who always seems so reserved, so careful about who you let into your life. I didn't want to risk ruining our family dynamic or making you feel uncomfortable. So we were both suffering alone, I said, kind of laughing at the irony of the situation. Apparently, he replied, also smiling. But maybe we don't have to suffer alone anymore. The air between us changed again, becoming charged with a different tension. No longer the tension of uncertainty, but the tension of possibility. We were sitting very close, hands intertwined, looking at each other with an honesty that had never existed between us before. Tyler, Jasper said my name in an almost whisper. Can I kiss you? My heart stopped for a second before accelerating violently. For 3 years I had fantasized about this moment, but now that it was actually happening, it seemed too surreal to be true. Yes, I managed to whisper back. He leaned slowly in my direction, giving me time to change my mind, but I leaned in to meet him halfway. When our lips touched, it was as if all the pieces of a puzzle had finally clicked into the right place. The kiss started soft, almost hesitant, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. His lips were softer than I had imagined, tasting of coffee and something sweet I couldn't identify. When he deepened the kiss, raising a hand to touch the back of my neck, I felt as if I were melting inside. We separated just enough to breathe, faces still close, breaths mingling. Tyler, he whispered against my lips. Is this real? I hope so, I replied, because if it's a dream, I don't want to wake up. He smiled and kissed me again, this time with more urgency, more certainty. His hands found my face, fingers lacing into my hair, while I instinctively placed my hands on his chest, feeling the tense muscles under his cotton t-shirt. The warmth of our bodies created a microclimate of its own, contrasting with the cool night air that escaped through the edges of the windows. It's cold, he murmured against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. And the house heating isn't working right yet. He was right. Despite the heat from the fireplace, I could feel the mountain chill seeping into the house. We can warm up here near the fire, I suggested, pulling some blankets from the nearby couch. Jasper helped arrange the blankets on the floor in front of the fireplace, creating a makeshift nest. When we lay side by side, the heat from the fire warming one side of our bodies while the night's cold cooled the other. I felt a sense of completeness I had never experienced before. "Tyler," he said, turning on his side to face me, "I don't want this to be just one night. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and pretend it didn't happen." "Me neither," I replied, also turning to face him. "But what about the family? Felix? Everyone else?" "Leave that to me," he said, reaching out to touch my face again. "Felix will be happy when he realizes how much you make me smile. And the others, well, we'll figure it out together." The way he said "together" made my heart race again. For 3 years I had resigned myself to the idea that my feelings for Jasper were something I would have to carry alone forever. The possibility of no longer being alone, of having someone by my side navigating these unknown waters, was almost too overwhelming to process. "Jasper," I began, but he placed a finger gently over my lips. "Shh," he whispered. "We don't need to solve everything tonight. For now, let's just be honest about what we feel." He leaned in and kissed me again, and this time I allowed myself to get completely lost in the sensation. His hands explored my back, fingers tracing imaginary lines along my spine, while I discovered the texture of the skin on his neck, the exact spot where his pulse beat fast. The world outside completely disappeared. There was only the two of us, the shared warmth under the blankets, the crackle of the fireplace providing an intimate soundtrack for our mutual discovery. Every touch was a revelation. Every kiss a confirmation that this was real, that it was actually happening. When we finally separated, I was breathing heavily, my heart beating so fast I was sure Jasper could feel it against his chest. He ran his fingers through my hair, looking at me with an expression that mixed tenderness and desire in a way that made my stomach flip. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Like I've spent 3 years holding my breath and can finally breathe," I replied, surprised by my own honesty. "Me too." He watched me for a few seconds, as if he were memorizing my face in the soft morning light. "Tyler, about last night," my stomach tightened slightly. "Yes? You haven't changed your mind, have you? About us?" The vulnerability in his voice made me realize he had woken up with the same fears as me. Fear that the light of day would bring regret, that the magic of the previous night would dissolve with the reality of the morning. "No," I replied firmly, turning completely to face him. "If anything, I'm more sure now than I was yesterday." The relief that passed over his face was almost palpable. He leaned in and kissed me, a soft morning kiss but full of promises. Sunday passed with a surprising naturalness. We went down to the kitchen and made breakfast together, our bodies navigating around each other with a newfound familiarity. Jasper made pancakes while I prepared scrambled eggs and bacon, and there was something profoundly intimate about sharing these simple domestic tasks. During breakfast on the deck, we discussed the inevitable return to the city that afternoon. "Tyler," Jasper said, pausing with his fork halfway to his mouth, "when we get back, how do you want to handle this?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, this thing between us. Is it going to be a secret? Are we going to tell Felix? Your family?" The question made me confront the practical reality of what had happened. For 3 years I had fantasized about being with Jasper, but I had never really considered the practical implications of turning that fantasy into reality. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to scream it to the whole world, but another part is afraid of ruining everything by making it public too soon." Jasper nodded understandingly. "What if we start slow, not hiding it, but also not making any big announcements yet? We can see each other during the week, like a real date, and see how we feel about it all when we're not in this fairy tale environment." The suggestion reassured me. "A real date?" "A real date," he confirmed, smiling that way that always made my heart race. "Where I can take you out to dinner somewhere nice and we don't have to pretend it's casual." We spent the rest of the morning walking around the property, Jasper photographing details he said he wanted to remember. The way the morning light filtered through the trees, my silhouette outlined against the lake, our fingers intertwined against the forest background. There was a gentle urgency in capturing these moments, as if we both knew we were documenting the end of one phase and the beginning of another. When it was time to leave, around 3 in the afternoon, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. Sadness for leaving this place that had become the setting for our mutual revelation. Anticipation for what would come next in real life. "Tyler," Jasper said as he tied his backpack to his motorcycle. "Wednesday night. There's a new restaurant downtown I want to try with you. A real date, where I can pull out your chair and pay the bill without it being weird." I smiled, feeling butterflies in my stomach for the first time for a completely positive reason. "Sounds perfect." He came over and kissed me right there next to our respective motorcycles. A kiss that was simultaneously a farewell and a promise. Until Wednesday, Tyler. Until Wednesday, Jasper. I watched him leave on the dirt road, the sound of the motorcycle gradually fading until it disappeared completely. But for the first time, seeing him leave didn't cause that familiar sense of emptiness in my chest. Instead, there was anticipation, a sweet expectation of when I would see him again. 3 days later, I was sitting on a bench in Civic Center Park, my hands slightly shaking, holding 2 cups of coffee I had bought from a nearby food truck. Jasper had suggested we meet there before going to the restaurant, said he wanted to talk somewhere meaningful, neutral territory where we could discuss how to navigate this new dynamic between us. When I saw him approaching, wearing dark jeans and a light blue dress shirt that highlighted his eyes, I felt the same familiar clench in my stomach that I always felt when I saw him. But this time, instead of resignation, there was hope. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sitting down next to me and accepting the coffee I offered. "Traffic was impossible." "No problem," I replied, watching him discreetly. There was something different about him, an openness, a softness that wasn't present during family gatherings. "Tyler," he began, turning to face me completely. "These last 3 days have been the longest of my life. I was afraid that, away from that mountain atmosphere, you'd realize it was all a mistake." "It was the opposite," I admitted. "The more I thought about everything, the more certain I became that that was the most real thing I've ever felt in my life." He smiled, that genuine smile I had learned to recognize as exclusively mine. "Then can we stop being afraid and start figuring out what this is like in real life?" "We can," I replied, feeling a wave of courage I didn't know I had. Jasper reached out and found my hand, lacing our fingers together right there on the park bench, in the middle of downtown Denver, not caring who might see. "Tyler Mitchell," he said formally, but with a playful twinkle in his eyes. "Would you like to go to dinner with me, as my boyfriend?" The word boyfriend resonated in my chest like a song. For 3 years I had fantasized about hearing Jasper refer to me in some possessive, intimate way. Now that it was happening, it felt surreal and perfectly natural at the same time. "Jasper Rodriguez," I replied, mimicking his formal tone. "I'd love to." We sat there for a few more minutes, watching the park's movement at dusk, families heading home, joggers finishing their daily routes, couples walking hand in hand like we were doing now. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an external observer of these scenes of everyday intimacy. I was finally a participant. "You know," Jasper said, squeezing my hand, "I've always wondered what it would be like not to have to hide what I feel for you. It's even better than I imagined." I looked at him, at the man who had occupied my thoughts for 3 years, and who was now sitting next to me, fingers intertwined with mine, making plans to have dinner together as boyfriends. The journey from invisible observer to active participant in my own life had been both terrifying and liberating. "Jasper," I said, turning to face him completely, "thank you for helping me stop hiding." "Thank you for being worth the wait," he replied, leaning in to kiss me softly right there on the park bench, officially sealing the beginning of our real story. What you hear here is just the beginning. The full stories, unfiltered, and with all the details you can imagine, are available now. Check out the link in the description right now, subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. When we got up to go to the restaurant, walking side by side through the streets of Denver, I felt that I was finally living my own life instead of just watching it happen. And it had all started with the courage to ask someone to sleep next to me.